So we're talking to four individuals here that represent scale on a Texas scale. These are large places, large communities, not only geographically, but also in terms of population and the number of players that are involved. So we certainly want to come back and talk about stakeholders in just a minute, but Lonnie and John are bookended here conveniently. One of the most rural cogs in the state, and then the fourth largest city in our nation, the most diverse city in the country. You include that larger footprint that you're talking about, John. It's got to be one of the largest, it's one of the largest MSAs in the country as well, obviously. What does it mean to lead on the scale of something that would be as large as a U.S. state? So you're running Lonnie, what would be a statewide initiative in 7 states. John, you're leading in the fourth largest city, much less that larger geographic footprint. What does it mean to lead on this issue in that context? Then we'll get Marcy and Cassandra to come in after y'all talk a bit.
Well, I hearken back to previous experiences. One of the toughest thing a county judge ever has to do is float a jail bond. And we floated a jail bond. We had to. School bonds. What I tell people is you have to sell the need before you sell the solution. And very much is true with broadband. Now, the pandemic has come along, and I almost said has sold the need, but the pandemic has given us, it's sold the need to a lot of people, and it's given us all the tools we need to make our case. But we still have some selling the need to do in some of our communities. Now, we've been at this for about 4 years, so we've done that in Deep East Texas. You can't rush it, but you just got to start talking about common issues and common problems. And even at the point 4 years ago, we didn't dream we'd be where we are today as far as our involvement and our engagement. But we set out with some core principles that we believed in. Number one was coverage for everybody, every single home and business, no matter how rural or remote it might be. And we have to have reliability, which means redundancy, and we have to have affordability, because we happen to be in a region of Texas where even if we had broadband at every home today, half of them couldn't afford it. So, those were key principles that guided us from day one and allowed us to kind of come together. And honestly, in our case, I've got a 55 member board of directors. That's kind of unusual. But I will say that the 12 county judges are the ringleaders of that board. Now, all of the judges aren't on the board. I've got 3 or 4 that are not on my board. But when our county judges come together in rural counties, the people will follow and our board members will follow. So getting those county judges, one of them's in the room today, Judge Weeks of Newton County, getting them together on the same page was a huge start for us. And just continually talking about the need and the fact that we're tired. Those of you that remember Charlie Wilson, if you saw the book or if you read the book or saw the movie, he famously says, by the way, Charlie Wilson was the first president of DETCOG when he was a state senator. He famously said as a congressman, the reason he could do all this stuff to beat the Russians in Afghanistan is because I represent the only congressional district in the nation that never asked for anything. That's us. We never asked for anything. We finally have sort of awakened. We kind of skipped the 20th century, and we drug ourselves directly from the 19th to the 21st, and we've decided we got to start asking for things.
Well, certainly the need is there. I think from a leadership standpoint, credibility of your organization, the leadership background of your organization, you're an aggregator, you're bringing that regional scale together, and you can demonstrate the need because you've done planning, and I think planning is incredibly important. We'll come back to that in a bit. But the plan is one thing, how you move to implementation is another, which does involve collaboration and leadership. John, so what is it like to lead on the scale that you're attempting?
Well, I'm not sure this is what I signed up for, but as a motivated public servant, it's a responsibility for us to ensure that the funds that are going to be made available are utilized in a way that is efficient, that we're creating that collaboration across communities, and that we're serving the needs of our residents. So that is priority. How do we create the structure to bring a fragmented system of stakeholders together is the cornerstone of our work. Like the state of Texas, Harris County's broadband strategic plan will be rolling to the Commissioner's Court for adoption, hopefully unanimous vote there. on June 28th because it's an issue that crosses both sides of the aisle. It's economic development, and it's enabling the organization to meet the needs of our residents and facilitating that quality of life to those that don't have the benefits of broadband availability. And this is important when we look at the approach to LEAD, that we're creating a space and centering this work based on data, based on needs, and based on the opportunity to leverage those existing resources and capabilities across organizations to achieve our larger outcomes. This keeps it laser focused because through any process, decisions are a trade-off. They are a trade-off because you may not necessarily, any of us will get what we want, but it will serve a higher purpose and keep it something that is really focused on ensuring that those funds are utilized in a mechanism and a way to benefit the most possible. And this is a means for us to now facilitate the strategy to center this work focused on the intersection of the broadband availability and the needs of our residents.
Appreciate that you started with the service ethos, and it's something that certainly takes us back to one of the elements that Dr. Alley talked about in the previous panel. Marcy, you worked in Judge Wolf's office pre-pandemic. I know that broadband is something you were working on then and there. So picking up on Judge Hunt's comment, how important is the county judge in an urban area? And again, just more broadly, what does it mean to lead from San Antonio Connects?
Yeah, sure. So I don't know if y'all are all aware, but Judge Wolf, basically he read Steve Jobs' book and came up with this idea to do an all-digital public library. It's called Bibliotech. It's been in existence since 2016 and is starting to kind of scale actually in other areas. And a lot of what that was able to do pre-pandemic was the digital literacy, the adoption support, the education, and then device availability to certain communities in need. The pandemic escalated that need and pointed out the need for the infrastructure investment. So you can send a child home with a device, but if they can't connect adequately, what's the point? And so actually our biggest leaders for SA Digital Connects was our private sector. Private sector activated during the pandemic and started handing out devices, hotspots, whatever it may be, and then realized that the infrastructure need was vast. And they put together funding and funded our digital equity plan that was completed last year. And now we are in implementation phase of that plan. But really it was our private sector leaders kind of piggybacking off what our county and city had already kind of started doing, and then bringing them back into the fold to really implement the plan.
Looking public-private origin points here, which we might come back to. Cassandra, you're leading across a state border and an international border. So what does leadership mean in the Borderplex area?
So I'm very much used to this whole 3-state, 2-nation idea. So I represent 2 organizations. So it's the Borderplex Alliance and Borderplex Connect. So my primary role is with the Borderplex Alliance, which is an economic development nonprofit that's fully funded by the private sector. And our intention is to recruit companies to the area and of course do some advocacy. Now, for my role at the Alliance, I lead our workforce development teams and I am a part of the economic development team. And so when the pandemic hit, really it's like, okay, well, where's my workforce? How can I actually put in my proposals that I have a workforce when a good number of them can't even go online to apply for a job? And so ultimately, we jumped into action and realized that there were a number of different entities in our community that wanted to also be involved in digital inclusion. Hence, then Borderplex Connect coming to the fold. But really, in our area, we're very much used to just it all being one region. You know, crossing across the border is a typical thing, whether it be into New Mexico or into Mexico. But what's been amazing is that the counties in both Doña Ana County and El Paso County, they each have their own representative that has really been an anchor for why we've been able to be so successful. And given that we are approaching this issue as an economic development issue, we already have a number of different contacts, whether it be in the public sector, the private sector, nonprofit sector. So it's easy for us, or I would like to think easier for us, to be able to just unify everybody and act as a central point as all these projects are happening.
And there's certainly an enlightened self-interest, public or private, and in that economic development space where you're bridging the two for everyone to contribute to this and to figure out a way to go forward and get to solutions. No, from a leadership standpoint, values and beliefs, design principles are really important. Those required and essential elements that must be a part of anything going forward. Judge Hunt, I've heard you talk about many times not allowing cherry picking, that you really want to serve all of the residents of your 11 counties. You know, John, you were working on digital inclusion in Austin. Marcy, you talked about a digital equity plan. How important are, and how do you think about, and how do we truly achieve digital equity and inclusion, given the disparities that exist in almost any sector of our work and in our society? How are you focusing on equity and inclusion in your work? Marcy, start first.
Sure. So when our region created our plan, it was very important that we focused on digital equity, not just digital divide. And we have, the way we went about doing it, and I might be jumping ahead, but we brought together 140 community organizations, and they informed the plan as it relates to equity. The city of San Antonio also did an equity survey of residents, and that was enabled us to have an equity score that we can associate with certain zip codes. So we're able to rank really by zip code and starting to drill down to street level where the highest need is based on that equity score.
So having, again, the data, the plan, and objectifying the need and the equity through data that you really can't argue about. You can put a spreadsheet up on the wall and say, well, column B and column C are different. Let's talk about why, what's going on there, and how do we address those differences. John, what approach did you take in Austin, and then how is your work in Austin informing the work in Harris County?
Yeah, so some background there. Austin, I think my former boss is in the room, Rondella Hawkins, the telecommunications officer for the city of Austin. And this is something that city of Austin was the second city in the United States to receive Google Fiber. And this was in 2013 that they announced their deployment. I understand that work is still underway there. Infrastructure takes time, especially when you're deploying infrastructure in the right-of-way. You find out a lot of surprises that you didn't think you knew at the front end. And this is something that we developed a prioritization matrix. Through the agreement that Google Fiber had entered with the City of Austin Network Services Agreement, this was something that Google Fiber established 102 facilities that would be able to be public purpose facilities connected to gigabit speed internet. And this was new at the time, and this is something that we worked collaboratively with our elected officials, community members, our commission, to develop a priority matrix for the program. So this serves now all the libraries, middle and high schools in Austin. But this is really a good example of how communities, coalitions, partnerships can develop that prioritization matrix. The Google Fiber Community Connections program had over 300 applications. We only had 100 sites to choose. So how do you identify those priorities to connect? And this is where that matrix that was approved by City Council helped in the ability to ensure that there was a fair and equitable process to develop those subsequent recommendations. And this is something that now, as we look at the funding opportunities in front of us, how do we evaluate the needs of our residents? Looking at that digital equity piece, because as my counterpart in Detroit says, you can't subsidize your way to equity. So how do we provide some of these principles of competition, choice, creating a consumer marketplace that provides the opportunity for residents to have more than one provider to choose from is important. In Harris County, our example is that we have a number of communities, including Highlands Village, which there's only one provider, and the service is less than broadband. And this is a means for us to establish a mechanism and a process to facilitate equity. When we look at what that process is, it is something that we look back to some of the federal infrastructure projects of yesteryear. The highway infrastructure work is a good example. There was a system and a process in place to ensure that those highways connected, because we probably, some of us in the room were too young to know quite how they did it, but it was in segments and phases, and they actually met in the middle in a lot of places. And through this lens, we're able to create a strategy in which we can leverage the capabilities, capacity of more urban centers where there are more resources and funds available through our existing agreements and technical capacity to then develop an approach to connect with our rural neighbors, including those counties in rural, Waller, and other areas that really can demonstrate the model in place that needs to be in place for us to execute this strategy. Because that then creates this systematic approach, and it's something that we can benefit from the subsequent opportunities.
So, Cassandra, I'm going to go to stakeholder engagement next. I'm going to ask Judge Hunt a question. I want you to be thinking about how we think about collaboration and coordination and stakeholder engagement and the role that equity and inclusion plays in the Borderplex region. Judge Hunt, equity is hard for some organizations to say, especially in our state. But fairness is a fundamental American value. And so is it fair that, I know your region well, it's my home region, is it fair that on average rural East Texans pay 400% more per megabit than do residents of Dallas-Fort Worth? Is it fair that half the zip codes in that area as large as 7 U.S. states don't even have broadband if they have internet at all? How does fairness or equity and inclusion inform the work that you're doing in Deep East Texas?
Well, it lit a fire under us, for one thing. I might as well go ahead and show my visual. This is, I get a lot of mileage out of this. This is Deep East Texas. It may look like a Dalmatian dog to you. And we're not a square region, by the way. We're odd shaped, but this is Deep East Texas. It is a Dalmatian spotted dog. If you happen to live on one of the spots, guess what? You get broadband. But guess what? I myself and thousands of other people in our region live in an area that's not on one of the spots, and we don't get broadband. I don't have it at my home. I have a nice home on Houston County Lake, one of the nicest places that you could imagine to live. We don't have broadband. I use my phone hotspot, my wife's phone hotspot, and 2 additional Verizon MiFis, because sadly AT&T cell service doesn't even work at our house. So we've got to figure out a way to blanket cover everybody on this piece of paper. That's accessibility or availability. Then we got to talk about affordability. And as Dr. Rosser pointed out, we had a study conducted by Ericsson for our region. It found, and they compared us to DFW because their North American headquarters is in Plano, Texas. And so they compared what they found in Deep East Texas with what they see out their back door in Plano, Texas. And the people in our region who live in the spots and have broadband, if you analyze the cost per megabit of service, we pay 4 times more than our friends in Dallas-Fort Worth. That's totally unfair, unacceptable to us. And I want to talk about affordability, and I want to make this point. The emergency broadband, I just looked this up on the internet a while ago while Charlie was talking, but I was listening to you, Charlie. The recently ended emergency broadband benefit program put $3.2 billion in funding. The current ACP, Affordable Connectivity Program, which replaced EBB, is $14.2 billion. So what we're doing at the federal level, we're spending billions and billions of dollars to help people expand broadband into areas like Deep East Texas, but it's not affordable. So then we have to turn around and spend another $17.4 billion to give individual $30 a month grants to everybody out there who can't afford it. Why don't we just put all our eggs in one basket and create an affordable program to start with so we don't have to have these $30 a month grants? I mean, that's what I'm talking about.
And if you think about the white, well, think about Judge Hunt's map. We're in a region with higher than the state and national average of food insecurity, higher than the state and national average of poverty. So it is when you put it again on a Texas scale, you compare us to the state of Texas, which scores high on the poverty and food insecurity scales, we're more so. And we're asking our residents to pay more than the residents of DFW. Again, I know that story well. It's my personal story. I live outside the city limits, and we were paying a lot for a little that was unreliable, especially when we were doing everything from the pandemic. Cassandra, again, working across two states, three international border. Let's start thinking more about this collaboration and coordination piece. How are you thinking about equity and inclusion and stakeholder engagement? Coordinating whom, collaborating with whom, and how do equity and inclusion inform that?
Yeah, so it's a pretty daunting task, to be honest with you. There's so much area to cover, and all with such different interests, right? But to put in perspective, recently we completed a feasibility study in El Paso County. There's one about to be done in Doña Ana County as well, where we were really able to identify the need in our community. And what we found was that 1 in 4 individuals who live in central and on the lower valley portions of El Paso County don't have access to the internet at all. And a lot of that really does span, of course, we are in the situation where we get to work in both urban and more rural parts of our county. And a lot of the lower valley does hit that rural county part of El Paso. But, we could throw stats here and there, right? But ultimately, I know a colleague who works at the Cardboard Project had mentioned that a story really does make a big difference. And so kind of to put into perspective, right, who we're working for, when the listening tour happened in El Paso, we were able to bring in a superintendent along with a number of different individuals from the respective school districts in El Paso County. Well, one, she's from Fabend ISD, she's their superintendent, and she came with a paper really with a timeline of what it was like from a school district's perspective during COVID and how they had to handle all of this, they couldn't even go to school. And so one part of her presentation that really just stuck to me was a photo of, he could have been a kindergartner or first grader who had to go to a community center, sit outside of the community center, and he had a little sandal, like his little shoe, right in front of him, and he had a cell phone, like leaned up against that shoe, and he was taking class outside, and it's hot in El Paso, and so it's you know who you're working for. You're working for that child, and a little bit more into like the collaborative aspect. Of course, you have the providers, you have the nonprofits, you have the public sector, but really it's been impressive to see just the community really want to work in this area as well. In Doña Ana, we're working with a group called the Mamacitas Cibernéticas, and it's literally a group of moms who want to be able to be digitally trained to help their kids with schoolwork. And so there's like a really strong group of like 4 moms going through, and they're actually completing their own feasibility study in their community. And as we continue to support that project, we want to replicate it in other parts of El Paso County and of course along the border.
Never underestimate moms. So give me the name of that group one more time.
Mamacitas Cibernéticas.
And translate it?
It's just cyber moms, basically.
Cyber moms. I like it. I think that would work in rural East Texas. Collaboration and coordination are different things. You can probably coordinate without collaborating. Where would you put on that continuum your work, John? I'll put you on the spot and we'll get others to respond, but how different are simple coordination, and especially when you're the 4th largest city in the country, you can say, hey, this is what we are doing, I'm letting you know so we can coordinate, versus truly building a collaborative partnership where we're all working towards solving the same problems. How are those different, and do you get more done with one than the other? And if so, then what's possible when we all truly work together to do something that none of us could do by ourselves?
Good question. Yes. So the intent, starting out with the intent to collaborate. What are the values and the principles driving that collaboration? Because collaboration leads to coordination. And the intent to collaborate is rooted in principles of a shared service approach. There is a benefit to the economies of scale as far as the principle. And when you collaborate, you are able to achieve scale. And this is something that is really rooted in the ability for us to create a shared process that is one process for our region, however we define that region, or if we get more clarity later, that is something that drives and inspires that collaboration. The coordination is really then rooted in those principles of project management. And this is something that when you're looking at that project management and the values that have gotten you there through the collaboration, it is something that those benefits are able to outweigh the risks of not collaborating. So our key question that we ask through our partnership is, how do we demonstrate the benefits of working together against the trade-offs of not? And this is very important when we're looking at the limited funds that will be available, because they will go quick. When you're talking about infrastructure and constructing and digging up right-of-way, installing new infrastructure, probably paying a premium to get some of your equipment and resources, because vendors are starting to do that now with the challenges in the supply chain, that this will be a tremendous opportunity for that coordination to occur. So like the reference earlier, the ability for us to create that shared system where we are able to then look at the opportunities to build out infrastructure in areas that need it the most now, and create that pathway to connect subsequent communities based on future resources that may be available, because this will sort of occur in waves with regards to our project coordination moving forward, creating those phases to facilitate that work, and really looking then at your ability to maintain and operate your subsequent infrastructure that's been deployed.
Marcy, Cassandra, Lonnie, thoughts on what can we get done together that we can't do by ourselves?
So I'll jump in real quick, because practically speaking, the way Bexar County San Antonio's plan came together was through coordinated input. That informed the plan that we now have. But what we're attempting to deploy now is the collaboration piece. So in a way, we maybe are doing it a little opposite than what John mentioned, but now we are trying to activate all of our stakeholders to move the public discourse and the pressure to draw down dollars, right? To implement the plan, to actually put fiber in the ground or whatever, put it in the air maybe. I think that's actually been harder for us, the collaboration part, the activation part. That's real, because all of our community partners, they have their purpose, they have their mission, and it's probably not broadband. It's probably not, getting broadband into people's homes, because that's ours. And so I think what Comptroller Hagar said today was really eye-opening, and I think what I want to take back to our area, name a problem, and it's made worse without connectivity. I think getting all of now we're up to 200 community partners in our area, getting all of them to kind of accept that premise, so to speak, so that we can then activate and implement the plan, so that the problems they are addressing become easier, and kind of painting that picture, that story, like Cassandra was talking about. I think that's where we are in San Antonio. So we're at collaboration. We've done the coordination, and I think we're at collaboration in San Antonio, Bexar County right now.
No, and I think we've been very fortunate that a lot of people in the area are very interested in this. And so thinking back we actually, when we were starting to put together Borderplex Connect and their respective coalitions, ultimately we had these like core groups for each area, and the majority of them were women, so I'll reference them as the ladies. But the ladies, we were all just really like busy bees, right? We're like, we know we can get this done, we're used to going through the processes, and because we had the busy bees as the core group, when we would talk to our respective bosses, they would just champion the fact that we're doing all of this. And so having the working component and the advocacy component was really helpful for us, which led to now the city and counties each having dedicated dollars to ARPA funds, right? And so as the state continues to work, there could be that additional investment in our community, which was awesome. And, you know, it's great to just also be able to see that the collaboration has also been very much influenced by economic development, right? So because of the collaboration, we are looking at the process to which we make sure that it's easy for a provider to be able to work in our community. On top of that, for the economic development perspective, so I actually have to fill out these requests for proposals, which are hundreds of questions long, and you can't even begin to imagine what these companies start to ask for, right? And you just can't Google search it. But in any case, broadband is starting to come up on our proposals. And so it's been interesting knowing that we're working in this. Now it's really coming into play into, are we going to be able to attract a company? And on top of that, when we're looking at what are called greenfield sites, right? There's a lot of mega projects that are becoming available now. And Texas is really positioned to be able to take on these mega projects, but we need the infrastructure. And so what we've been able to do is find what we're calling shovel-ready properties to be able to just like deploy these broadband, and we have the plans already prepped. But on top of that, we have greenfield sites dedicated to economic development, and we've been working with the providers to get a cost analysis on what it would take to actually get those places connected. So we couldn't do it without the collaboration and all of this. So it's been nice to see everybody kind of playing their part to make sure we're successful.
And the role of planning comes through everything that you've been saying really since we started. So Judge Hunt, you have a 12-county plan. Economic development is a key part of that. Jobs, GDP, you know, it would be explosive if broadband were unleashed across the counties. So that maybe is one thing to talk about, but what else have you been able to get done together that you couldn't have done by yourself?
Everything we've done has been done together. We couldn't have done it by ourselves. And what we're doing right now is we are literally, we're not constructing yet, but we're doing environmental and final engineering, boots on the ground engineering to build the first piece of our regional broadband network in northern Newton County. It's funded with a $9 million grant through the Texas General Land Office. We have assisted Sabine County with getting a $12+ million grant that's being leveraged with some more private dollars. That's going to make a $17 million project in Sabine County. That's an NTIA funded project. In the latest round of projects, Sabine County was the only project in the state of Texas that got funded. So we're proud of that. Sabine County was the applicant. They're partnering with Windstream, which is their local telephone company, which is also putting dollars in to leverage the federal dollars. Windstream will build it, but Sabine County's on the hook for that federal money. So we're going to contract with Sabine County to assist them in the oversight and administration of the grant and reporting and make sure that all the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed and that everything is done right and it'll be a big success. And we're very proud of that. We are now, we think, about to expand what we're doing in northern Newton County to 6 other counties. We have just yesterday posted for public comment a method of distribution for Hurricane Harvey mitigation funding. And for our region, we are proposing to allocate $48 million of that funding to a regional broadband project. It'll have to be used in the counties that were disaster counties under Harvey, which are 7 of our counties. So that's a significant chunk of our region. And that has cleared its first big hurdle in that the GLO has conditionally approved our preliminary method of distribution, and we're now in a 15-day public comment period, and we hope by early June to finalize that and expand. But everything that we've done has been achieved through collaboration. The TLL Temple Foundation has been a wonderful partner for us. They have supported us financially, and as important as financially, they've added a certain amount of gravitas to. We started this thing 4 years ago, and I well remember having a phone conversation with 4 CEOs of our 4 electric cooperatives, who I believe have a key role to play in achieving what we're trying to achieve for blanket coverage for a large region. And I could just, they were very kind and very nice, and I could just hear in their voice, yeah, old Lonnie, he's fallen off the tomato wagon. You know, the DebtCog's they don't know anything about this. They don't have any business doing this. They're not going to be able, you know, some of those electric co-ops had already invested money to do their own studies to find feasibility, and they just couldn't connect the dots and make the dollars match up. But they were supportive and helpful nonetheless, and everything that we are designing is based on the electric co-op infrastructure. We have non-disclosure agreements with all 4 of those, and I yearn for the day that they'll be ready to take that next big step out there and say, okay, we're ready as a co-op to solve this problem and manage this solution in our service area. And when they do, I'll be ready to propose that we hand off what we're doing to them, because I still think that makes more sense than anything else. But this collaboration among the counties, just the Temple Foundation's support of our project has helped bring those partners to the table. It's helped show our local stakeholders that this is a serious effort, because they know the Temple Foundation would not be involved in something that was not a serious effort. And they know that when they issue grant funds to an organization, they expect to see some results of the grant, and they expect accountability. So that's been huge. Working with our various funding partners. You know, our initial feasibility study was funded with Hurricane Ike money. Ike hit in 2008. We got that money about 4 years ago and contracted with Ericsson. It's a division of Ericsson called Encode Consulting, but it's very much Ericsson, one of the worldwide technology leaders. And that's one thing we learned early on, because we didn't hold ourselves out to be experts. We didn't plan to get into this to become an internet service provider, and we still don't. We plan to get into this to bring the parties to the table that were necessary to solve this problem for our region. One thing that we've sort of discovered or not discovered along the way, sadly, and I hope I won't be able to say up here months from now and say the same thing, but sadly, we've not found another current player, so to speak, who has the same vision that we have, that every single household has to be connected. And that's because our internet model now is on a for-profit model, and we understand that. And you know, I'm a red-blooded free enterprise American. I'm all for the free enterprise system and for-profit companies. That's the basis of our whole economy. But to solve this problem on a regional level, especially in large rural regions like ours, is going to require a not-for-profit cooperative type solution for a lot of these people. And we also have to think about sustainability, because if there's enough money out there today, and there is, to literally go out and just build service specifically to those unserved areas, leaving the others out and not duplicating anything, probably those unserved areas will not be able to sustain that system over the long haul. It's like the electric cooperative or a telephone cooperative. If you took the electric co-ops, half their customers away from them today, and oh yeah, it's going to be the half of customers that you can actually make a little money on, the whole electric co-op grid would crash. They can serve everybody.
Let's not talk about that right now. Let's not talk about grids.
Okay, no. They can serve everybody because they cast a wide net, and that net includes some customers where they actually make some return on investment, some customers where they break even, and some customers where they know they're losing money every month. But when you put them together, in the big cooperative type structure, it works for everybody. So really what we're trying to do is create a safety net. We would love to see fiber to every single home. That may happen. I hope it happens one of these days. It won't happen soon in our region. So the plans we're talking about are fixed wireless. We may be able to do direct fiber in some places where it's feasible, but the overall plan to be sure everybody gets covered is fixed wireless. And it's not going to be a bad thing if there is some duplication of service area. That's the reason the folks in Plano pay 4 times less for their internet than we do, because they have multiple providers to choose from. I'm sorry, I talked too long.
Well, it's a soapbox I appreciate. Most other segments of our market-based economy have competition. Where else there's, you walk down the street, you've got multiple restaurants, you walk out in the parking lot, there are multiple brands of vehicles. So where is choice not important in that red-blooded American system? And why is rural America the only place that doesn't get a choice and get the benefit of competition when it comes to broadband? Again, a soapbox I appreciate. Let's spend the last few minutes of the panel talking about, however you want to frame it, challenges, missteps, opportunities for improvement upon reflection of past work. What are some things that haven't gone as well as they could have? We've got communities in various stages of starting this broadband work. What can you get wrong really easily that you wish you wouldn't have in the previous years you've been working on this? I'll let anyone that has something they want to share start.
Coming back to me, and that way you can cut
Not
me off.
necessarily, but if you want to start, you can, Lonnie.
Lots of challenges, and I'll start with that song, and I'm not going to try to sing it. Money, 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 money. It's all about money, but you've got to have a plan and be ready to ask for that money. Otherwise, the money is wasted. So you got to get a plan. You got to get people in the room that are smarter than you are, especially if you're like me. You got to surround yourselves with experts, and I'm going to put another word in there. Objective experts. There are lots of people, and God bless them. They're in business to make a profit, and they have a plan, and they have a dream, and they have an idea, and they want to share with you how we can fix this. You've got to have objectivity. You've got to be looking out for the common good of everybody. You have to get those people that you're collaborating with together in the room right up front, and everybody has to decide, we're going to do all the right things for all the right reasons for the common good and not let politics get involved in any of it. And as a result, the first region-wide network plan we developed was going to do less in my home county of Houston County than in any of the other 11 counties of our region. The reason was we were targeting CDBG grant money that was aimed at low, moderate income households. And I can talk all day about the unfair rules, HUD rules of low, moderate income. But suffice it to say, even though my county is one of the poorest in the state, under the federal rules, we didn't have enough low, moderate income census tracts. And so, but that's okay. People knew that what we were trying to do was doing all the right things for all the right reasons to match the funding that was available to us without regard to politics. And I also feel like if we get it done in part of our region, that'll provide the impetus to help us get it done in the rest of our region. So it's all about money, but you got to have a solid plan. You've got to be objective. You can't let individual players get in and start slicing up the pie. Well, like they carved up Europe after World War II. That's not going to work. And okay, I'll shut up.
Lots of lessons learned. Lonnie will be around. He'll be happy to share.
I'll be really quick. One of our initial challenges was figuring out what kind of entity was going to own the plan that we have, that the private sector funded. And there was a little bit of hot potato with where it would go. We landed on a nonprofit association, which is an association registered with the Texas Secretary of State. It's not its own entity, though. It doesn't have its own EIN. It doesn't have 501c3 status through the IRS. And so that's why we partner with our Economic Development Foundation called Greater SATX to be our fiscal agent. So that was our biggest challenge. Once we landed on that, we got rocking and rolling.
Because once you accept the responsibility, it's yours too, right? And so that's a pretty big consideration, especially the scale of things that we're talking about. Cassandra?
For us, there's three things that I think really played into how Borderplex Connect turned out. One of the main challenges is that all of the ladies have full-time jobs, and thankfully we were supported through our bosses to be able to dedicate some time to this, but realistically there's a capacity limit on what we can do until we hire somebody else, right? Or two people hopefully to represent each respective county. So there was that. The second thing is just unifying all of these entities without having a nonprofit established. So thankfully everybody kind of knew what we were working towards. We had a point person that would go through all the emails, but having the nonprofit right now, we have the nonprofit status. The El Paso Community Foundation is our fiscal agent. We have a website, all of that's going on. So it does add to the credibility of our group. So that was something we had to come through. But lastly, it's just managing expectations, right? You can apply for all these grants, you can put time into these projects, but really everybody needs to understand that there's hundreds of other communities that are also applying for those grants. There's all these other projects that are happening at the same time. And so managing people's expectations and just ensuring that they are going to still want to collaborate with you because they, of course, have their own respective interests.
So my response is going to be from three frames. We're going to start, I'll start with the macro. In the state of Texas, there are certain statutes that exist which make the role of cities and counties to promote and support broadband availability a little unclear. And I believe through the next legislative session, we'll develop an approach to clarify this and remain diplomatic in how we're communicating some of the challenges. So through that, we have a collaborative that I am a part of. I know there's some collaborators here, 15 cities and counties, all of whom are metro cities and counties. The total population represented by the cities and counties that are participating in this broadband collaborative is 67% of the state's population. What is the greatest challenge that cities and counties have? Our role. Because of the issues that exist with some of the clarifications that need to go into our legislation, this is something that will open up opportunities for a more clear role to advance broadband availability for our regions and our communities. Because like Jennifer Harris said, we know our communities the best. And at the regional level, how do we facilitate this shared service model so that we're able to maximize the funds available? So this challenge around procurement and having a one systems approach to our interface with any vendor that will be facilitating this work is something that will be a challenge, because we understand and appreciate the goal to partner with providers. That is going to be imperative in this work. However, if one region gets a certain price threshold, how is that equitable for what another region in the state may get from the same provider? So there should be an approach that opens up that opportunity for consistency across markets so that we're able to really demonstrate the shared values that go into this work. So that's a regional challenge, is the interface with our partners, our subsequent partners through the ISPs, but also with those agencies that are going to be helping to provide the capacity and capabilities to build out that infrastructure. We can't do this alone. And anything big takes partnerships. So having that model and template available will help. On the micro level, with regards to Harris County and the state of Texas did this under Greg's leadership at the Broadband Development Office. Bring together your departments first internally to evaluate what leverage resources are available. This will help then minimize the complexity of some of those existing communication infrastructure opportunities that may go missed. So that's been a challenge because Harris County, 15,000 plus employees, 40 plus departments, a number of them under elected officials. We now work under an administrator form of government there, so we have one appointed administrator similar to a city manager that is helping to create this transformation necessary to get those departments at one neutral table so that we can evaluate those leveraged opportunities for those towers, the existing antennas across various service areas, existing fiber, especially that very lucrative dark fiber that we're after, to evaluate what does the toll road have, what does the pollution control district have, what does our port authority have, and being able to align that with that regional approach, because the mapping is going to be important in this work to coordinate efforts. We're doing, all of us, the best we can with the maps that we have available. More is needed. And through this subsequent work with our partners, the providers and those that can connect communities, that will really help us to ensure that we're successful.
Well, we could go on and on. There's lots to talk about when you talk about leadership and coordination, collaboration on a Texas scale. I think you've heard from all four of our panelists today about how they're doing that in their home region. And just to John's point, you start adding up some of these regions and the collective nature of the regional work, we get to a pretty large scale quickly. We know that lunch is next, so we're not going to go on and on and on. But I will say, the five of us are around. If you want to visit with us, please come grab us. Any of us will talk about this all day, every day. But please join me in thanking Lonnie, Marcy, Cassandra, and John.
Can I say one last thing, Win? I promise this will be brief.
10 seconds.
I just want to close on an encouraging note. I was terrified when we started, and the further we went into this. But if you get a plan and start bringing those people together and working, it's amazing how doors will open. One door after another opened just when I would think, well, we can't do that. So, and the other thing is you can't wait on technology. If you wait until you think you know what the future is going to hold, you'll never start. So get a plan, get started. It's amazing how the doors will open.
I want to add also, I left one-pagers, I think, at the front on our entity, if you want to look at our entity a little deeper.
Words to live by. Thank you, Win and panel.